with the country apparently drowning in what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. referred to as the triple evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism, and with less than 4 weeks before the next presidential election, the Biden administration, along with several major corporations such as Meta and Alphabet, the owners of Facebook and YouTube, respectively, appear determined to clamp down on any public discussion of the major issues, in particular, the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. The most recent effort has been YouTube purging a variety of different journalists and political analysts, particularly those with a contrary view of foreign policy. One among those is a regular contributor here, analyst Mark Sleboda, based in Moscow. And we spoke with him today about his recent experience with YouTube.
Let me set some context and where I think at least some of this began. Just about 2 weeks ago, the U.S. State Department, Jamie Rubin, he runs the State Department's Global Engagement Center, essentially the propaganda and intelligence wing of the State Department. And in a speech, he said, one of the reasons, not the only reason, why so much of the world has not been as fully supportive of Ukraine as you would think they would be, given that Russia has invaded Ukraine and violated rule number 1 of the international system. That's pretty rich coming from the U.S. Anyway, is because of the broad scope and reach of RT, where propaganda, disinformation, and lies is spread to millions, if not billions, around the world. Okay, so that says it right there. The failure of the U.S.'s existential economic war of sanctions on Russia is due in large part to the rest of the world refusing, the rest of the world outside the West, refusing to get behind the U.S.'s war of sanctions on Russia. They said, no, we're not, we're neutral, or, we support Russia or whatever. We're not getting involved in this. And what that has led to is that Russia's economy has actually grown despite Western sanctions, rather than the contrary. In fact, it's Europe that has suffered far more from these sanctions than Russia. So they're scared, right? And they are blaming the rest of the world, not listening to the U.S.'s propaganda, disinformation, and lies on what's happening and has been happening in Ukraine on RT. So that kind of signaled a war being launched on Russian media, and anyone who associates or quote unquote collaborates with Russian media in the past few weeks. And one of the online media outlets that was targeted is African Street. They were targeted almost immediately because, of course, they're critical of U.S. and Western neocolonialism in Africa, so they must be Kremlin puppets, right?
Well, this is the same thing here. The civil rights movement, for example, going back to the 30s and 40s even, was blamed entirely by J. Edgar Hoover and HUAC and all the others on communist infiltration.
On communism. Exactly.
Before we get into the next phase here, there's just a little color I want to give people for this context. First of all, in terms of the sanctions being a failure, forgetting all propaganda, almost immediately when the sanctions were declared in April or May of 2014, China stepped up. They didn't need any American propaganda or Russian propaganda to do this, and made the largest business deal in the history of the world, which ended up supporting the Russian economy. It was a 20 or 30-year contract to buy oil, gas, and other materials from them in unheard of volumes. So whatever their context is here, that this has to be done because it's interfering with our ability to impose pain on Russia, that entire line is a load of nonsense. This guy Rubin that you mentioned, who was the first shot, aside from the fact that he spent a good part of his time at places like Sky News, and as we found out, he was really shilling for the Center for New American Security and that whole neocon group. And he's married to Christine Amanpour. Okay, so we know who this guy is.
No conflict of interest there at all,
So,
right?
If that's your first shot, you understand where the sniper is seating. That's all.
Yeah. So, and it must be said, actually, not just China. India has bought absolutely insane record amounts of oil and gas, vastly increasing what had been small volumes. But part of that, of course, is because there's a global shortage. Because if Europe isn't buying gas and oil from Russia, or at least not as much as they were, then they have to buy it from somewhere, which taps into other sources. And it's a finite commodity.
And it goes the other way, too, by the way. I'm China or India sitting on top of an economy that's growing in leaps and bounds. I'm planning down the road. I see this gas station, as Obama put it, next door, lacking customers. I go in I swoop in basically and make the best deal I can while they're down.
Sure, they made good deals on energy, right? Making their economies more competitive than European economies, which is part of what has led to the economic collapse and deindustrialization of Germany and the rest of Europe. Anyway, so African Stream was blocked on YouTube almost immediately, and it was pursued on other platforms. Then, and they have not been restored, by the way. Then TikTok, under U.S. pressure, already facing being shut down, trying to force them to sell to U.S. ownership. Right? They're not actually a Chinese company. They're out of somewhere in Southeast Asia officially. But anyway, the TikTok shut down RT and Sputnik on TikTok, and that started things rolling. And then on YouTube, I suddenly received an email from YouTube informing me that my channel was being shut down. The Real Politic with Mark Sleboda. Now, I had no strikes and no warnings, none. I had a blemishless record, right? And I had not posted any new material on YouTube in 10 months. 10 months. Because I had been focusing on radio and other things. And quite honestly, I haven't had enough time to do videos myself for YouTube. And I had never monetized my channel because I thought that would bring more potential censorship scrutiny to it. And I'm like, I don't care about the money. I'm getting out what I believe is necessary for people to hear that I believe about the conflict in Ukraine and elsewhere, right? Geopolitics in general. But of course, that was a big focus. So no strikes, no warnings, just you have violated community guidelines regarding hate speech. No specifics, no examples, not in this video. Nope, just your channel has violated it. That's it. You're gone. You're allowed an appeal. I appealed within minutes. It came back. After careful review, real careful. Your channel, and I find out that my channel was at the same day. DD Donbash, formerly Donbash Devashka, DD Geopolitics, Sarah, whose channel I have also regularly, like once a month or so, appeared on, and their channel was blocked as well. And then within a few days, the former she used to be an anchor for RT. And she is still a radio host for Sputnik, Rachel Blevins from Texas, a friend. And she has featured me on many of her interviews, right? Both on her own channel.
Me too. Yep.
Yeah. And she was blocked, and she is just mild-mannered, professional. Just I can be a bit fire-breathing sometimes, although I think I keep far away from things like hate speech. In fact, I have blocked people for using the same type of ethnic derogatives referring to Ukrainians as the entire Western media, particularly the NAFO trolls, has used on Russians, like referring to them as Vatniks or Ivan, whatever. I don't allow them to be used about Ukrainians around me because my wife is from Crimea, right? Yeah. I've got family in Donbass and Kharkov.
It's
and
not
Odessa.
Serious conversation. We're talking about public policy here on a global scale. That's nonsense. It's kindergarten.
It's political. It's political of a regime that seized power in the country, and it is wrong to paint all Ukrainians with the brush of the regime or with its far-right supporters, which are a minority that has hijacked violently political power in the country. I'm sorry, to accuse me of hate speech is frankly absurd.
Yeah.
And it went on, and others have been targeted in recent days. Fiora Elizabella, Larry Johnson, the former CIA, previously Scott Ritter was targeted. But then they targeted the Norwegian political scientist, professor of international relations, also an associate of mine who has appeared on Russian media, but on media around the world, right? Not just RT or Sputnik. Glenn Diason. And if you're not aware for him, check him up on Twitter. Yeah. So he is the most mild-mannered, rational, calm. In fact, I would say that he's mild-mannered and logical to a fault, where he sometimes fails to understand a situation where people are driven by things like ideology or a hardline geopolitical thinking, zero-sum thinking. He genuinely gets confused sometimes, I think. He is genuinely a good guy, right? And his channel, out of the blue, blocked. And that was just, this is obvious a trend, right? Anyone who has worked for, associated with, right? Myself, I have never been an employee of RT or Sputnik, but I do get compensation for interviews and work with them, like I have with media around the world, like as is standard for political commentary, whether I've gotten it from BBC in the past, admittedly, Al Jazeera, CGTN, you name it. That is, the business, right? If you have expertise, there's some amount of compensation for your time. And so I received compensation for the interviews, but I have never actually been an employee of RT or Sputnik. But anyone who collaborates with Russian media, right? And the focus is on Ukraine because of what a desperate situation the U.S. is. Now, Glenn Diason has done a series of interviews with a number of important political figures who are also dissenters from the Ukraine narrative on Russia. And one of those is Jeffrey Sachs, who is an interesting figure, once a globalist icon, but then underwent a Damascene conversion and has become an anti-imperialist socialist of credit, I would say.
Yeah, sent into Russia, into the Soviet Union, basically by the first Bush administration to help turn it into a capitalist country, shock therapy and all of that. And now, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. My wife has very bad memories. Jeffrey Sachs, so she's a little.
The entire country does.
Yeah. But
1990s.
Yes, but he did an interview with Glenn Diason and find out that his YouTube channel was censored, and then he said, "Well, let me make some calls. Let me see what I can do." And it appears that he still has some cachet, right? Whether that was threats or appeals, who knows? And as a result of probably that, although we're not definitively sure, Glenn Diason's channel, without explanation, was returned in a few hours, right? Within 24 hours. And then within a series of a few hours after that, successively, Rachel Blevin's channel was returned, GD Geopolitics was returned, and then mine was returned. However, it has been returned now suddenly with 5 videos removed, again, supposedly for violations of community guidelines regarding hate speech. And what I see this is they're effectively grudgingly giving us our channels back, but they are informing us that de facto officially, right, if that's not a contradiction, that political censorship in line with what U.S. Western government narratives on Ukraine is in effect.
We're watching.
Yeah, we're watching you, and I regard this restoration as temporary and inherently qualified, right? Now I've since reviewed each one of those 5 cases, and again, these are all old videos, right? I don't believe that this is an algorithm, right? This is too targeted, too specific people in too short a time targeted. And these hate speech, there's nothing there. In fact, I could have come up with better. The things that they now cited to me, now that they've returned my channel, because they didn't cite anything the first time, right? It was all just hate speech. That's it. Now they've given me specific examples within these 5 videos, and they're all absurd. They have nothing to do with hate speech. They're like a cauldron being formed on a tactical level on the battlefield or something like that. Which makes no sense. It's like they're random, like just pulled out of a hat or something like that. Random comment.
Yeah. Go ahead. What?
Yeah.
Like what?
So I'm going to challenge all of them, of course, and I'm going to publicize them now and put them up on my social media, showing what YouTube is identifying as hate speech. And like I said, I thought it was going to be something like me, some kind of whitewashing and apologizing of me talking about far right battalions like Azov or Centuria or Kraken or Right Sector or something in Ukraine. No, it's just absolutely ridiculous stuff. Russia repelled a series of offensives by Ukraine in the summer of 2023 in Roboltina on July 16th. Right? I mean, which is like fact. I mean, what is possibly hate speech there? It's absurd. And I regard this as some kind of random post facto justification that no one even put any time into.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, my takeaway is that YouTube is still this temporary restoration is still unusual because of a regime of political censorship in line with U.S. government interests. And if you didn't know, YouTube is owned by Google, which is owned by Alphabet. And if you have not read Julian Assange's Google is Not What It Seems, there's a short article form, there's a longer book, which he wrote years ago, exposing the collusion between the U.S. State Department and Google as an actual engine of regime change for the U.S. government, the revolving door between the U.S. government security services and State Department and Google. It was really eye-opening for me, and I think that everyone needs to read that to understand this beast of Google, of YouTube, and how much control it is exerting over all of us, not just in the US, but all of us globally. It's frightening.
There's, and to add to that, as we close, because we're kind of over in time, Dr. Robert Epstein, also his writings, has written a book or two about Google and talking about the manipulation of, he basically did studies, took all kinds of data, and proved basically that they screw around with the returns with very definite political agenda. Mark, I really appreciate your time, and I want to talk about this some more as it develops, obviously. And how could people look? Give us a website of yours or a link of yours where people can go look at the documentation that you're going to post.
Yeah, so I'll be putting it on, primarily my Substack and Twitter, also X. although that's another one that is being censored very quietly. Not myself yet, but other people. So Substack and Telegram and Twitter are the best ways to follow me currently.
Thanks, Mark. We will be speaking with you again, no doubt.
Thanks.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.